Hi. I don't know if people can hear me. It's kind of silent where everybody else is, but thank you everyone for watching tonight. It's a really special film, and Ricki and I are incredibly happy and pleased that we're part of the conversation. We have filmmaker, producer, director Lyn Goldfarb here with her father, Eddy Goldfarb, and producer Jannat Gargi. And I just want to say that I know that I hope everyone feels the way I feel after this, and I feel really grateful that Lyn made this film. So from there, I'll let you guys take it.
I'm going to unmute myself. Hello. Are we waiting for Eddy? There he is. Well, thank you all for joining tonight. And again, thanks to everyone for inviting Annie and me to host the screening. When I first saw this film, I wrote to Jannat right away and I just said, oh, I love this movie and I love Eddy. And I immediately showed this film to my 80-year-old parents who were so inspired and loved Eddy's attitude. Your optimism, Eddy. So you've been an inspiration to all of us. I'm going to start with some questions that we have, Annie and I, and then I guess we'll open it up to people's questions. Lyn, let's just start with you. You're a filmmaker. You have a long career in filmmaking and have had a Academy nomination in the past, which we lost Eddy, but Eddy told us earlier he got to go with you. You can tell us about that. But tell me what inspired you to make this film about your dad, and going into it, were there concerns or were you wary at all?
And for me, there was no wariness or real concern, but it was a very different kind of film for me to make. I really don't make personal documentaries. And while through my filmmaking career, I've looked for interesting people whose stories have helped change the world or change our lives in some way. And, I actually had never thought about my father really being in that way until I started making a family legacy project by starting to do some oral histories, of him. And as soon as he started talking, and as soon as I saw him in a different way of being, I was the interviewer and he was my subject, not just my father, it completely transformed my viewing of my father. And I think our relationship. I mean, it's a very different thing to listen to have your parents tell stories, as you're growing up, and then to have the opportunity of really asking questions and listening in a different way and understanding my father and his life in a very different, much deeper way than I think I had, seen it before. So it's really been quite, a privilege to be able to do this and to really be a part of my father's life in this way. So it's great. And I do actually want to add that both I have a sister and brother. My sister, Fran, worked with my dad for a while in the toy industry. And my brother, Martin, is in partnership with my father. And so both of them were part of the business. I never was. I ran off to be a documentary filmmaker. So it also allowed me to see the business and this, understand the toy making part of it in a very different way as well.
Jannat, I'm going to get to you, but I want to go to Eddy first because he's the star. So Eddy, I just want to ask you, what was it like when your daughter came to you and said, I think we want to make this movie about your work and about you? And what did you think? And I'll start there. What did you think?
Actually, I thought it was a nice idea as long as it wasn't a big bother. And I knew she was talented. I saw her other stuff. So I felt very good about it. And it was very nice having her, the cameras and what have you.
I want to ask you about being on the submarine during World War II. You made some of your first toys then. What, if you can remember the first, or what was the toy that you made on the submarine? And also, why make toys? What do you love about toys that you wanted to make that on the submarine?
I never thought I was going to work in toys. I just finally knew that if I wanted to be an independent inventor, to be on my own, I would have to specialize in some one industry. If I just went from one industry to another without knowing too much about any of them, I didn't think I would get that far. And I chose toys because I thought that would take the least amount of money to get going into it and things like that. So I made up my mind that I was going to specialize in toys on the submarine uh, during the war. I actually remember just about when it was. It was when the war ended in Europe. But we knew that we would be fighting the Japanese for 3 or 4 more years. But at that time, I decided to do some planning for the future. And that's when I decided to specialize in toys.
I have to ask one more question about that. Your toys are so whimsical. They range across so many different ideas and genres, but there's so much humor to your toys, like the chicken laying an egg or the teeth, the yakety yak teeth. Where does that come from, if you know, or do you have a really good sense of humor?
Uh, I think I do have a good sense of humor. In fact, they voted me on the vote of having the best sense of humor. Uh, so I think that's part of it, and that helped me all
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
All your life. Annie, if you want to jump in, Annie, you're welcome to. But I'll throw it to Jannat. I just want to ask Jannat, talk to us a little bit about being a producer on this project and what you saw in it that you knew. You do so many films that are always so moving and emotional and connect universally to people, and this film is one of those. What did you see in this film, and just maybe talk a little bit about the distribution of it?
Sure. So hi, everyone. So I met Lyn 2.5 years ago after a panel that I was on at the Get Real conference. And, she came up afterwards and just started telling me about this film that she started to make about her father. And having a father who was older and, very artistic, was a writer and a filmmaker and a playwright, and always wanting to have captured his stories, and I never did. I was just immediately intrigued by what she was doing. And Lyn shared 5 minutes of footage that she'd been filming with her dad. And, I was just really taken by Eddy. You're very inspiring, you're positive. But also what drew me to it was just this idea of creativity and inspiration, and where do you get that inspiration from to create? And that's something that Lyn and I talked a lot about over the course of the film, because I felt it was very important as she was documenting her father to really try to help translate his creative process and talk about the creative process, which I personally find very fascinating. So, here we are 2 years later. The film has done a great festival run, and this was independent. At the time, the company I was with, we focused on social impact films, and this definitely didn't fit in there. So it was something I pursued independently, and I'm so grateful that I did. as far as distribution, it's been incredible. As we all know, getting a short film seen and distributed in the marketplace is very tough. There's only a handful of places that take on shorts. And we were fortunate enough that the New Yorker loved the film. They very much wanted to distribute the film. And our partnership came together with them very quickly. We began conversations with them late October, and already they had the film premiere right before the holidays in this special curated program that they were doing in partnership with Google. So we were fortunate in that we got a lot of promotion. The film immediately started trending. It has almost 1 million cumulative views between YouTube and the YouTube New Yorker channel and Instagram and the GQ channel overseas. So it's very exciting to see that, this film resonates with audiences because it is inspiring, because it is uplifting. And, the comments, there's thousands of comments that were coming in from people, which Lyn can talk about, but people are moved and genuinely, love the story. And especially given the times that we're all living through, it's very refreshing. So.
Lyn, I wanted to ask you, did you get toys when you were growing up, or it was only your dad's toys?
Oh, well, we got toys and we played with my dad's toys, and he brought home prototypes and we tried things out, and, we're testers, and people that he worked with always sent toys. We always had toys, in the mail. And for a while when I was, really young, he was doing the premiums and cereal boxes, the little toys. And I remember we would always have so much cereal, that was sent to us. But really when we were playing with toys at home and trying them out, it was a very, it wasn't anything that we were ever allowed to talk to our friends about. We were sworn to secrecy, because these were the items that he was going to put out. And so it was, it wasn't like we lived in a house that there were toys in every room, it wasn't like this image of, this, crazy toy maker, household. This was my dad started out working in his garage, but then ended up, having a shop, and he went off to work every day, but he would bring things home for us to try and play with. And, then we would also see him, certainly at work, but, as a toy designer, he designed the prototypes and he didn't do the manufacturing. So even in his shop, there was, they were working with models, and they were, drawing things. So it wasn't like there were always, finished toys all over the place.
Eddy, because you have 3 children, did you look to your children when you were inventing toys and think, how do kids play with toys? Did you throw something at them and see if it would work for them? Or was it really sort of in your own mind, in your own creative fantasy? How much was it like seeing what worked with kids?
I really think that most of it was in my own mind, although I did ask them questions and ask if they would play with this or that, but mostly in my own mind.
Eddy, we have a question from the audience. And the comment is, wonderful film. Thank you for your service. I'm also a Navy veteran, Eddy. Did you go to college at all before or after you served? Or did you just start working on inventions because the Navy gave you confidence to start your career right after you served?
Before the war, I couldn't afford going to a normal college. I went to night school and worked during the day. I worked in R&D at an instrument company and went to night school. And then I joined the Navy in a special program to get into radar. And radar was very hush-hush at that time. and they sent me to the University of Houston, which was wonderful, for engineering. And I spent almost a year there, day and night, studying engineering. And then we went to San Francisco for getting introduced finally to radar. It was, as I said, top secret. And then when I finished that, that's when I decided that I would volunteer for submarine duty.
Wow. Well, I agree. Thank you for your service too. It's remarkable the time that we're in right now, and when you look back at our history, I'm sure we could have a whole other film with your perspective on where we are now, but we'll put that to the side, Eddy. We do have another question from the audience, which is for Lyn. Can you describe what it felt like or feels like to see your dad's toys in stores? And I would extend that even to, like, in television shows or, movies, you have clips of it. What does it feel like for you to see your dad's toys just loved by so many people in so many areas?
Well, I think growing up, it was very normal, to see the toys in stores. And sometimes we would all go and, to some of the big toy stores and, look at them as well. But I think making the film and trying, like, rediscovering some of those early toys, and I think realizing also, like, in particular, that chattering teeth, the yakety yak teeth, and realizing I always knew they had a big place in pop culture and everybody always knew about them. But as we were researching it and finding out all the places and how much, how many, whether it was early television talk shows or, a film like Goonies or, Toy Story, I mean, or even the Beatles. I mean, it's really, it has a meaning that everybody immediately relates to. And I think with the film that it also allowed me to see that it really went viral at a point before things went viral. So it wasn't a big item in the beginning, and yet it just caught on, and people kept loving it year after year after year.
I would like to ask Eddy, there's another question, but I just want to ask Eddy, what does it feel like for you to see your toys so beloved and so widely, remembered and still so relevant? My own kids have the chattering teeth, and love it. My own kids have the chicken that lays an egg. I mean, I'm just naming the two that I remember off, like I remembered, but there's so many that you created. What does that feel like, Eddy, just to know you're in everybody's household?
Well, at the very beginning, of course, I had no funds, but I met a wonderful woman named Anita, and we got married. And she knew I was never going to get a job, but she was going to support me, and she did. And the first items that we saw, you mentioned seeing in a toy window. I almost remember the first ones that were in a Walgreens window or something, and it was filled with them. And we got such a big kick. It was nice. It was very nice seeing it. And our first toy show was very successful. But I couldn't have done it without Anita. She was a big, big help.
Eddy,
All the way through.
Can I actually add something to that? I think that one of the things with, the film being on YouTube now, the film came out this year during the pandemic, so we really never had any in-person screenings and never had that connection with audiences like at film festivals. But on YouTube, we are getting so many comments from people that we don't know that probably would never come to a film festival. And a lot of them are about what the toys meant to them. Mm-hmm. And it's really heartfelt. I mean, I think I appreciate in a very different way people who talk about having difficult childhoods, and having a stomper, truck with something, that kept them going, or people remembering, the good things about their childhood as they saw, some of the toys in the film. And so I think it really, showed me a resonance that I hadn't quite realized before, through all these people who I'll never meet, just writing a few words of what the film meant to them.
I know Annie has a question. I will just say, I ate a lot of cereal to get those toys. I'm just saying. And then we'll get to, there's a question from the audience, but Annie, you had a question?
Yeah, it's funny, by the way, my daughter laments the fact that toys don't come in cereal anymore because she's seen that and she wants it. She's doesn't get that right now. Eddy, this sense of optimism that you have, I'm just curious, are people born, do you think they're born optimistic? Can you cultivate optimism?
I kind of think people are born with more of an optimistic feeling than not. But if you're an inventor, you have got to be optimistic. As I tell people, if you want to invent, you've got to learn to love rejection, because there's so much of it. You can't be too discouraged. But I was very fortunate all my life that I did have an optimistic outlook for anything, especially during the war as well. I knew even in the heat of battle, I was optimistic things are going to turn out okay for us.
Yeah. There's another question, Eddy, from the audience for you. What do you think about all the apps and video games? And didn't you invent one of the first video games? And are we going to stunt development of the new generation by not giving them actual toys? So I guess it's the question, what do you think about all these apps and video games? And did you yourself create one?
Yeah, we were in it at the beginning, at the very beginning. We made Barbie games from Mattel, and we made Hot Wheels from Mattel. And that was very exciting. But I didn't, but it was also like making a movie. It was also like making a documentary. I didn't want to get into that. I wanted to make new toys and new games, and making a movie wasn't my kind of interest.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to follow that, do you think there's any, let me put it in a positive way. What do you think kids and people get from the physical toy in their hand, playing with it, maneuvering it, that is good for humans, it's good for people? What do we get from playing with those kinds of toys?
Well, at the very beginning, I was really interested in physics, and that's what I wanted to be my major. But then when I got into toys, I realized very quickly that it's really a very important part of our lives, just like teachers. That when you put out a game, say it sells 1 million units, as I've talked about, it means 1 million families got together playing with their kids, and 1 million groups of kids or more got together. And this is very important. I hear from adults who collect some of my toys, telling me how important it is today. They are collectors of them, and it's a big hobby, and it does have it does help, and especially when you're young. And I think the toy industry is a noble industry, and it's very important part of children and their families growing up.
I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about your solar toys that you've invented, that you,
No, I didn't invent them. I collect them.
oh, you collect them. What,
Yeah.
what do you love about them?
Well, the first thing I love is that I buy them at a 99-cent store. Instead of paying $10 for them, I pay 99 cents. I think they're tremendous. I think solar energy is something that we're all going to be in more and more and more. Much more than we are today. The sun is out, all that energy is wasted, and the faster we get our roof types, which have solar panels that take care of most of the energy that we consume, the better off Earth will be, the people on Earth. So that toy just reminds me of how important solar energy is, and I got a big kick out of it.
I have one more question for Eddy. I don't want to hog the floor here. So if you guys want, but I want to talk a little bit about your 100-word, 100 stories. What is there a connection between your creativity when you make toys and when you tell these very structured 100-word stories?
Well, I started trying to write short stories as a hobby when I was very young, and it just didn't work. When the computer came around and I can use a computer and make my changes and make my deletes and make it became much easier for me, and I started writing stories seriously. And then I heard about the 100-word story. I didn't start it. It's a worldwide hobby of writing a complete story in 100 words, just as there were stories written in 6 words, and which were just sort of a novelty. And so I joined a 100-word contest in a neighborhood newspaper about 10 years ago. I didn't win, but I kept writing them from then on. And to make it 100 words is not that easy, but if you keep on doing it, it becomes easier. And it's really a very healthy exercise.
Lyn, your dad talks a lot about rejection, being an inventor, being creative, having to deal with rejection. I wonder, how that influenced your life and even in the creative work you do, even in the creative work of choosing to make this film. And I know you said you usually have to get grants for your projects. You've done a lot of PBS work, and this one you went forward. But how has his attitude and sort of this, it influenced you?
Well, I think my father always encouraged creativity and encouraged independence. He was never the kind of, I never grew up in a household where either of my parents said, go get a job. It was like, follow your passion and, figure out really what you want to do. And I started becoming, I started my career as a filmmaker with the film With Babies and Banners, and I had no idea. I mean, I didn't go to film school. I didn't, really have any official training. I was working with another filmmaker, Lorraine Gray, who was a director. But it was like, follow this idea, see what will happen. And I felt like my parents really respected, like, going out on a limb, trying to figure out, what you want to do with your life. And I also know that from my father, that you have to be optimistic. You have to accept rejection. I mean, you can't be a filmmaker either without being able to accept constant rejection. But you also have to be able to have a vision, of what you want to do. And that's what he taught me. And he also taught me kind of not to sweat the small stuff. Don't get upset about something. If somebody messes with you or if something doesn't go right, keep your energy positive. And I think that, don't worry about that. You want to have a clear head, to think of other ideas. And I think that's something that is the way that he led his life. And I think that's why he was so respected also throughout the toy industry, as also just as a really nice guy, and a nice person. And that's the values that, all of us in our family, grew up with. So, I don't think I could be a filmmaker or could have been a filmmaker if I didn't have a father, like Eddy.
I think that's so clear in this film, and I think that's what we all attach to in this film is Eddy, your optimism, your ability to think creatively and change it up and keep yourself going. And I think that whole notion of walking, just getting out and clearing your mind and being creative after you lost your wife is something that is inspiring to all of us. It's a good medicine for all of us to remember that. I wonder if there's a last, something that you, Lyn or Jannat or Eddy would like to say, or Annie, if you have a last question. Anybody?
Well, I would just say that I think it's been really both interesting and in a certain way very rewarding to have released this film during the pandemic. Yeah. And it having a very different relationship with audiences. I talked before about them being virtual audiences, but I also think it hits on a part of our lives and psyches that we need, a film like Eddy's World now, and we need this energy and optimism. And I think that's why so many people are writing to him and, really wanting to share their views. So in this funny way, maybe it was released at the right time, and it's the film for, this time in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely inspires me to go get some of the fun, whimsical toys to bring into my life right now, to bring into my family's life right now. We've been, I'm sure everyone out there, we've been playing lots of games in my house, card games and old games like Monopoly and Clue, older kids, but they still love those games because it brings you, like your games, Eddy, brings you back to your childhood, and they're so iconic. So I think we're so grateful that you've given us those memories that we hold on to. Thank Jannat. Is there something more you'd like to say?
I just want to, I'm so grateful to be part of this, and we should all take Eddy's attitude, and I'm saying this to myself, optimism, don't sweat the small stuff. That's my new mantra. That's my new mantra to live by. So
this is a really weird last question, but Eddy, I just have to ask you, what is your favorite time of day and why?
What is my favorite?
Time of day.
Time of day?
Mm-hmm.
I really think when I wake up, when I first awake. When I go to bed, I kind of review things, and I'm glad to get in bed and get it over. But I make plans on what I'm going to do when I wake up, and that helps. But can I just say something?
Please.
After I was able to get started, and after my wife helped me so much, and we did get started, I had the wonderful, wonderful pleasure of working with so many employees and associates, creative people, and optimistic people as well. And I just wanted to mention two of them that have been very important to my career, Del Everett and Renee Soriano. And that's been part of it. Also from the Navy, when I left, when the war ended and I left, I had 3 lifelong friends that we stayed in touch and saw each other all our lives. And so I've had the association of just wonderful people to work with.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much for tonight. It was really an honor for Annie and for me to be a part of this and to just share a little bit with this amazing film. So, yeah.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Lynn, for making it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jannat.
For getting behind it, making it happen.
Thank you for being here, for supporting the film, and I hope lots of people will get to see it on the New Yorker.
Yeah. And thank you, Ricki and Annie, so much for
It was a pleasure. I wish we could have done this in person, but
I know one of these days.
sometime in the future. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
If we did it in person, we'd all wear masks. No one would know who we're talking to.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you,
so
guys.
much. Good night.
Good night.